Hello, gunfighters, and welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting and gun-related stuff the right way with God at the center. Gonna try something a little bit different. You guys are probably familiar if you've listened for any length of time. The Better Know a Cartridge episodes. They're kind of short episodes on a pretty particular topic, so I think I'm gonna forego the lengthy bio. Try to abbreviate it. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Pretty succinct. You want to support? Go to Patreon. Should be a link in the show notes. Boom. Let's get into the day's cartridge. Today is actually going to be a cartridge versus episode. In one corner, weighing it at 150 grains and 2390 feet per second, we have the old school American 30-30 Winchester. In the opposite corner, we have the 7.62 by 39 from Mother Russia, with 122 grain at 2329. Ding, ding, ding. Kind of a fun intro, but if you notice, the weights and the velocities and stuff are pretty similar on these two cartridges, and they get compared. Sometimes I think too similarly. You may hear something akin to, the 30-30 is basically just as good as the 7.62 by 39. Or, yeah, the 7.62 by 39 is a great deer round. It's basically a 30-30. Some version thereof. There is a lot more to ballistics than velocity and bullet grain weight. There's a lot that goes into ballistics. Both external ballistics, not really going to go into internal ballistics, but external ballistics, which means what the bullet does after it leaves the barrel, and terminal ballistics, what the bullet does when it hits the target. So let's get into this. I should say, before I get started, if you want more on each individual cartridge, there was a whole episode, Cartridges of the Motherland, which covered the 7.62 by 39, and an entire episode on the 30-30 Winchester or Winchester centerfire. Let's start off talking about the 30-30. It came out way back in 1895. Is that right? I had to double check it. 2 sources by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. A matter is established. Yes, 1895. And it's still probably one of the most popular deer hunting rounds. Now, there's a lot of new deer hunting rounds. That's the problem. There's a lot of new ones every year. Neither one of them, I think, gains the momentum before a new one comes out to compare with some of the classics, like 30-06 and 30-30 Winchester. I don't know how to or how anybody could try and get a number on the number of deer and elk and pronghorn and all other beasts that have been put down with the 30-30. But I think it will be a safe thing to assume here in America it'd be in the top 5 of cartridge totals. And I don't know that, I can't verify that, but just logically, that seems like it would be a pretty safe assumption. I will be quoting a lot from the Cartridges of the World book, which was given to me by a patron, which I greatly appreciate, and the old trusty Hornady Reloading Manual, I think volume 8 or 8th edition, that I've had for a long time. If I pull some other information, I'll try and remember to give credit where credit is due. Now, the 30-30 was introduced in 1895. For the model 1894. Not only is the cartridge a classic, that gun is still around and it's still a classic. It's still being made by Winchester. I think it had a short, let's say, vacation where they weren't making it, but it's been made for a long, long time and it's still being made. Originally loaded with 160 grain soft point bullet and 30 grains of smokeless powder, hence the 30-30 designation. 30 caliber with 30 grains of smokeless powder. That tells you how long ago this was. Today we have all kinds of powders. This was just smokeless powder. It's very possible Winchester only had the one. And it's odd that it originally was offered in 160 grain, because today it's really common to see 150 and 170 grains. Those are the two most common grains, and it's rare to see 160 grain factory loading, but it's right in the middle. It makes sense. And if you care about its metric nomenclature designation, 7.62 by 51 rimmed, not to be confused with a very similar Soviet cartridge, by 51 rimmed. It's been around again since 1895. Think about that. Today we got guys hunting with rifles with really good optics and laser rangefinders and carbon fiber bipods and computers and all manner of things. When this cartridge was introduced, it was before Henry Ford built his first automobile. Double check that to make sure that's right, but I believe that's correct, and certainly before the first mass-produced automobile. People were on horseback when this cartridge came out. And it's still popular for deer hunting today. It was no doubt used throughout the West in all manner of conflict. Man versus beast and man versus man. It was never adopted by our U.S. military. It was likely adopted by some law enforcement agencies at some point. I'm not going to bother to look that up, but it would be weird to me if it wasn't ever. It's certainly capable in that class. And where it gets its reputation is as a deer killing cartridge. We hunt other things in America. We love the romance of elk hunting and the practicality of exterminating hogs and things like that. But when you say to an American hunter hunting, they probably first think of deer hunting. It's kind of the quintessential American hunting. When you think of kind of a quintessential American hunter from days of yore, plaid flannel shirt, pair of khakis or canvas pants, maybe some LL Bean boots and a Jones hat, what do you likely picture in his hand? Probably a Marlin or a Winchester, and most likely chambered in 30-30. Maybe a bolt action, but if you're thinking a lever action, 30-30 is a classic cartridge. It's just a classic American deer hunting cartridge. And some things go along with it being that old and being designed for a lever action cartridge. Meaning it's rimmed. It headspace is on a rim. It has a fairly pronounced rim. It's also meant to be stacked in a tubular magazine, as the vast majority of lever actions are, which means it has rounded bullets. Also because it predates where people even saw the advantage of a pointed bullet. And if you're stacking them in a tube magazine, you don't want the point of one bullet hitting the primer of the bullet in front of it. That's the era this was designed in. Now, let's talk a little bit about the 7.62 by 39. Introduced, I believe, in 1943. So you might consider it an old cartridge, but it's a young blood compared to the 30-30 Winchester, which came out in the 1800s. This was designed not for the AK-47, which it's almost certainly most commonly chambered in. You could argue whatever we have here in America is not an actual AK-47, it's some variant of, but that pattern of rifle. But it was originally chambered, I think, in the S.K.S. And two places I've seen have said that. There may have been some other experimental rifles, but the S.K.S., a semi-automatic, box-fed firearm. It was designed, very different purpose, for the Soviets as an intermediate cartridge for waging war. And as such, it's what we would consider a more, air quotes, modern cartridge. It's a rimless cartridge, meaning it can be more easily stacked vertically in a magazine. Also, it's got a Spitzer-type pointed bullet. I should take this time to point out, while they are both 30 caliber, Russians and us Americans do stuff a little bit different. We use .308 diameter generally in our 30 cals. Russians use .3112. Now, I do have a reloading manual that lists reloading data for .308 diameter bullets for 7.62 by 39. but I do believe it's supposed to be .30 well. So they're both 30 caliber. Like for downrange performance, let's say the diameter is pretty similar. And you're getting in the ballpark-ish of being close to each other as far as at least numbers on a page without getting too nitpicky. And not exactly. If you're looking for a clear power winner, the 3030 is going to get that. It is more powerful. For the cartridges of the world, it lists the 122 grain military ball ammo at 23.29. You could cherry pick loads all day long, but that's what it lists, the military ball ammo. And it lists a Black Hills factory load of 123 grain at 2300. So pretty similar numbers there. And that's most commonly what you're going to find, 122, 123, somewhere in the 120 grain-ish bullets at that 2300-ish feet a second. If we look at factory loads for the 3030, and I'm just picking the ones that are here in this book that I have in front of me, it lists 150 grain at 2390. And that's probably your most common, your second most common being 170 grain at 2200. But 150 grain at 2390. That's quite a bit more in bullet weight as far as percentage goes, from 120 something to 150. But as far as all the spectrum of centerfire rifle cartridges go, pretty close. At least, again, as far as numbers on a page, bullet grain weight, and velocity. But there's so much more to ballistics than that. Bullet construction is extremely important. I would say, to me, far more important than caliber. You may know from listening to the bio, I've been a professional big game hunter and guide. I've hunted all over this country since my youth. I would much rather have, let's say, a 243, which is very small in the spectrum of centerfire rifle cartridges, at least for big game. To exclude a lot of the varmint cartridges. I would rather have a 243 with proper bullet construction on an elk than a 300 Win Mag with the worst bullet construction, meaning like a full metal jacket. That's how important I think bullet construction is. And a lot of people, they just look at numbers on a page, especially if they've never slain a beast and eaten it or spent any actual time shooting things other than paper or steel. They just look at numbers on a page and think, oh, it's pretty close. But if you look at the vast, vast majority of 30-30 rounds, they are made as good terminal performing, expanding, usually soft point ammunition. They are meant to do well terminally. They are meant to do well as a hunting bullet, or as anything when it impacts soft tissue. And in general, that's what you're going to find if you go to a store and buy 30-30 Winchester. If you go and look at the vast, vast majority, I don't have numbers, but the vast majority of 7.62 by 39 ammunition, it is going to be 120 something grain ball, full metal jacket. And if it is a hollow point, like a Wolf or a Tula or something like that, it's not on par with what we would consider modern defensive ammo hollow points. If you look at how they perform ballistically, consistently, they are, for all intents and purposes, jacketed ball rounds. They are not meant to be great at terminal performance. I would certainly take one over a 22 long rifle or a lot of varmint rounds, but I would not take one in any way, shape, or form as far as terminal performance goes, round for round, over a good, even an average, what I would consider baseline 30-30 ammo. They are very different. Bullet construction being the main one of that. And here's what really kind of bothers me when I hear this a lot, is people that kind of love the 7.62 by 39, and they say, well, the 30-30 is great on deer, so if I need to, I'll just hunt with my 7.62 by 39. It's almost the same, but it may be almost the same as far as velocity and weight, But it's so different as far as terminal performance goes. So no, it's not the same. If you are going to hunt with it, I think you owe it to that animal. And lots of people do hunt with it. When I was growing up, it was kind of the poor man's hunting round, because S.K.S's when I was growing up were extremely cheap and affordable. And an S.K.S, I think, makes a good handy deer hunting carbine. And a lot of people hunted with those. But I think you owe it to that animal if you're going to plan on hunting with it. Not like a survival scenario or something like where that's your only option. And if you plan on using 7.62-39 in a survival scenario, you need to have some better ammo selection, just the cheapest, 123 grain Tula ammo you can find. But they do make good, I would call it hunting ammo. Good, usually heavier, soft point ammo, like your 150 grain soft point expanding ammo. Not like the dirt cheap, quote unquote, hollow points that you see from a lot of the manufacturers with like the bimetal jacket. I'm talking a good copper jacketed soft point exposed lead point bullet for the 7.62-39. If you do that and re-zero your rifle and confirm that it shoots that ammo where you're aiming, I would say that 7.62-39 is an acceptable deer round. If you have good bullet selection and bullet construction, then it can be almost as good as a 30-30. But if you think that your 120 whatever grain made to the lowest bidder, Tula or Wolf, I'm not picking on those manufacturers, that ammo is good for what it was intended for. It was not intended for hunting. It's not just as good for that. It's not almost the same as your baseline 30-30 bullet. Not even close. And you can flip that around on the guys that have the 30-30. It's kind of a half-joking term in the survivalist tactical world, the Redneck assault rifle. They say, it's just as good, or it's basically the same as a defensive rifle in 7.62-39, but it's not. If you live in a restricted state, I'm sorry to hear that, where your Second Amendment is not exactly shall not be infringed, but it's not just as good as that. I'd certainly take it over a lot of other options, but it's not an AK-47, and it's not an S.K.S. S.K.S is a good rifle. If you think it's just as good, out with somebody that has an S.K.S or an AK and run a simple run-of-the-mill standard for practical shooting, the El Pres drill, the El Presidente drill. Do it with both rifles, and you'll quickly see they're not just as good. You'll say, some people run a lever action really, really fast, and you certainly can, and especially cowboy action, but you got to remember, they're shooting pistol caliber carbines, very short cartridges, and usually they have installed what's called a short stroke kit. That's not the same as running your lever action 30-30. They certainly can be fast, and they certainly were fast for their day. Especially when compared to a modern semi-auto. They're fast compared to a lot of other things, especially things of the day, like a rolling block or a falling block, single-shot rifle. They're certainly fast. They're not fast like an AK or even an S.K.S is fast. They also, the 30-30, has those rounded bullets, so it doesn't do as good at extended ranges. Just like that 30-30 ammo is better for terminal performance at reasonable hunting ranges, that 7.62-39 is a pointed Spitzer bullet. Well, it's not the most efficient aerodynamic bullet. It's certainly much more so than a 30-30. Now, you can throw in a lot of what ifs and what about this and what about that, anecdotal stories. It doesn't matter if your uncle's brother's mailman once shot an elk with a 7.62-39 at 400 yards and it dropped with one shot. It's not a good round for that. I've heard the story more than once. I wasn't there, so I don't know if it's true or not, but of somebody shooting an elephant and killing it in one shot with a 22 long rifle. It's not good for that, okay? It's not going to consistently do that. They're different cartridges for different applications. There is so much more in ballistics than just velocity and bullet grain weight and energy foot-pounds on a piece of paper. What are you trying to do? The 7.62x39 was designed to be an intermediate warfighting cartridge. The 30-30 Winchester was designed to be a lever action hunting cartridge. What is your intended use? Not to say you can't press one into both. I would submit that either a 30-30 lever action rifle or an S.K.S. would be a very good all-around rifle for a survivalist, for a prepper. That doesn't mean a lever action 30-30 is just as good as an S.K.S. for defense, and it doesn't mean that a S.K.S. is just as good at hunting as a lever action 30-30. Going back to the what ifs, yes, they do make the Hornady's the only one that I know of, but they do make the pointed bullets with a softer tip that can give better BCs for the 30-30. And yes, you can reload for the 7.62x39. Now, the vast majority of ammo is steel cased, and without getting too technical, it has a type of primer that you can't reload, that you can't get the old primer out easily. The vast majority of that stuff you can't, but you can get brass cased 7.62x39 and reload it, and you can get really good and make really good hunting loads for that if you're doing that. And I would submit, if you are going to hunt with your SKS, owe it to your quarry to give it an ethical kill. You certainly can do that, but by the time you go through all that, you're likely better off just getting a lever action 30-30 with baseline 150 or 170 grain ammo you could just go down to Walmart and buy. Likewise, you can go kind of the Gucci route of today. It's kind of the fad thing, and get a super tacticaled out, heat shielded, M-LOK, key mod, QD attachments, all the letters, all the cool acronyms, tactical out your 30-30. Put a muzzle brake on it, and tactical it all out. And that's cool if you want to do that. But it's not, that doesn't make it an AK-47. Now again, if you're in a restricted state where you can't have an AK or even some other options, it may be your best option, but it's not the same as. As you might surmise from the bio, I've done quite a bit of CQB. I've also done quite a bit of hunting with bolt-action rifles. I can run a bolt-action rifle pretty fast. But if I'm doing CQB, I want a semi-auto. And no matter how good I can get with that bolt action, it's never going to be a semi-auto for CQB. And force it into that role. Obviously, plenty of CQB was done in World War II with bolt action rifles, because that's what they had, that's what they were issued. There's a reason you see a giant swing throughout that war of going from that to submachine guns, semi-automatic, intermediate caliber weapons. I can butcher and even bone out an elk on the side of a mountain with a fish fillet knife. I can get it done. It's not a good choice. You get what I'm saying. What are you trying to do with it? And although they might look similar on paper, they're very, very different. Let me go down this road a little bit. If I was going to hunt with a 7.62x39, I would look for the best loaded actual hunting ammo I could find, and I would probably get a Howa mini action or something like it, a CZ, a bolt action hunting rifle chambered for 7.62x39. And if I was going to use a 30-30 lever action for my one kind of gun, and it was my choice for defense because that's all I could have, or it was all I could afford and I wanted one rifle, whatever the case may be, I would almost certainly get a Marlin, mostly because it's easy and it has a good mounting system for optics. As much as I love the Winchester, it's much harder to mount an optic on. They do make the angle eject versions, but then you get kind of this high scope mount base thing. It's much easier with the Marlin, or the Marlin, a system copied from the Marlin, very similar to it, like the newer Henrys or whatever. Something like that. I'd put an LPVO on it, or a red dot, depending on what I was going to do. But if I was going to double down and hunt with it, I'd probably go LPVO. And I'd attach a white light to it. And for both options, I'd have a sling. Again, they're good cartridges, and you can do a lot of things with them. But I'd submit you're better off, if you can, starting off with the right tool for the job. lever action hunting gun or box magazine fed semi-auto. And I'm not even saying one is better than the other. They're as much as they get compared, they're apples and oranges. Anyway, with that, I think I'm going to start wrapping up the main topic. Likely many of you are disagreeing with me, and that's fine. You can contact me at goodshepherdtraining.com, goodshepherdtraining.com. Tactical tip that ties into today's podcast. If you want to run a lever action fast, you want to, hit the nitrous. And I should say, I've done a lot of competition shooting. I have never done cowboy action shooting. Again, a lot of that is pistol caliber carbines with a short stroke kit. You're talking about a full length rifle cartridge like a 30-30 and a traditional 1894 or Marlin 336. Try taking your hand out of inside the loop and grabbing the front of the loop. If you can track what I'm saying there. Instead of putting your hand right through the middle, you take your hand out and grab the front of it and pull. This works especially well if you have what's called a big loop. You can kind of quasi get a pistol grip kind of configuration on that, and you can give a lot more power when you pull it forward and slam it back. At least in my experience, and you can have your finger prepped for hitting that trigger as soon as that lever closes. If you're trying to run a lever action really fast and hit the nitrous on it, you may consider trying that technique, grabbing the front of the lever and pulling and pushing it back, instead of running your hand in the middle of it. And if you want to get tactical without spending a bunch of money, if you are going to keep your hand inside of that, and you start slamming it back and forth really hard, and you do it a lot, especially in dry fire, you may consider wrapping some paracord on there. Might want to look up what a Yule knot is. It's a good way to wrap. We used it back in the day for wrapping deck cord around stuff we were going to blow up. But it also works really well for wrapping string or deck cord or whatever around a hard, flat object. So you might want to look up what a Yule knot is. And it's always good to work on your knot skills, because if we learned anything from Napoleon Dynamite, girls only want guys with sweet skills. Anyway, seriously, if you enjoy this episode, if you enjoy the content, if you think, you may not agree with my opinions, right? You may totally disagree, but hopefully you think that I'm giving you an honest opinion. I'm not bought and sold and paid for by some gun company trying to tell you have to have the latest and greatest product or camo pattern, optic, whatever it is, right? Far different from a lot of other things that have just kind of become commercials for certain products or whoever pays them the most that month or whatever. And that's fine I'm not anti-capitalist. It's not what you get here. Hopefully you get an honest opinion. And that's supported by viewers like you. If you want to support the message, hopefully you'll consider becoming a patron. They get a lot of cool insider content. They get to ask questions. If you want to be, there's even a good insider chat that I'm blessed to be a part of, and I get a lot of information and ideas out of it. So I imagine everybody in there does as well. I'm very blessed and humbled to be a part of that. Either way, I am humbled that you gave me some of your time today. Very humbled and blessed. And I want to say thank you either way. With that, let's roll into the tactical verse of the day. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and recite Psalm 91. If it's been a while since you've heard it, this is one of those I would encourage you to memorize and perhaps say quite often. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, you are my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I will trust. Surely you shall deliver me from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. You shall cover me with your feathers, and under your wings shall I take refuge. Your truth shall be my shield and buckler. I shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor the destruction that lays waste at noonday. 1,000 may fall at my side, 10,000 at my right hand, but it shall not come near me. Only with my eyes shall I look and see the reward of the wicked, because I have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, my dwelling place. No evil shall befall me, nor shall any plague come near my dwelling. For you shall give your angels charge over me to keep me in all my ways. In their hands they shall bear me up, lest I dash my foot against a stone. I shall tread upon the lion and the cobra. The young lion and the serpent I shall trample under foot. Because I set my love upon you, therefore you deliver me. You set me on high, because I have known your name. I call upon you, and you answer me. You be with me in trouble. You deliver me and honor me. With long life you satisfy me and show me your salvation. Amen.